Alrighty, good to go. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Haley Oliver, and I'm the Manager of Communications with the Regional District of Central Okanagan, and I am moderating tonight's virtual information session on proposed updates to development cost charges, or DCCs, for wastewater services on the west side. Now, before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded Tumulao, or land, of the Syilx Okanagan people who have lived here since time immemorial. We recognize, honor, and respect the Syilx Okanagan people and the lands on which we live, work, and play. A reminder, this session is being recorded and will be posted to yoursay.rdco.com following the meeting, so you can refer back to it and share it with others who are unable to attend tonight. So the purpose of tonight's session is to provide an overview of proposed DCC updates for Westside Wastewater Services and to give you the opportunity to ask questions. Tonight is focused on information sharing and answering questions so you can better understand what is being proposed and why. So here's how tonight will unfold. We will begin with a presentation of approximately 10 minutes, probably 15 minutes from our engineering team. Following the presentation, we'll move into a question and answer session, so you can submit those questions using the Q&A tool that you'll see in the top bar. It's got 2 speech bubbles and says Q&A, so just type your questions in there. And then after the session, if you would like to provide any formal feedback, you can do so online at yoursay.rdco.com/DCC. This public engagement is open until March 19th, and so this session is one of many tools to learn more about the project, but if you visit yoursay.rdco.com, you'll find more information. So to get things started, I'm pleased to introduce our engineering experts this evening, Xavier Semelink and Kit Caulfield, who will be walking us through the proposed DCCs and answering your questions. So with that, I will hand it over to Xavier to begin the presentation.
Good evening, and thank you for the introduction, Haley. As mentioned, my name is Xavier Semelink, and tonight we will be providing a short overview of the Westside Wastewater Development Cost Charge Major Review and proposed updates to the existing development cost charges, or as I will be referring to them throughout the session, DCCs. The goal of this information session is to explain what is changing, why it is changing, and how you can provide feedback before any decisions are made. So with that, Haley, if I could get you to move on to the next slide, please. So with that, what is the development cost charge, or DCC? The province defines DCCs as a financing tool that allows local governments to impose charges for capital costs from developers to offset a portion of the infrastructure expenditures incurred to service the needs of new development. DCCs help cover the capital costs associated with the increased need for local government services arising from development. So what does that mean? Development cost charges are fees collected from new development to help fund growth-related capital projects. For wastewater, DCCs help pay for large infrastructure like treatment plant expansions, trunk sewer upsizing, and lift stations that are needed due to the region growing. It does not cover day-to-day operations and is not charged to existing homes just for living there. The basic idea is that growth should help pay for the infrastructure it needs, rather than putting that cost entirely on existing residents and taxpayers. Next slide, please. This map shows the RDCO-owned wastewater infrastructure and where they're located relative to Peachland, West Kelowna, and WFN ION number 9 and ION number 10. The black dot in the center of the map marks the Westside Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant, which treats wastewater from the City of West Kelowna, the District of Peachland, and Westbank First Nations, IO 9 and IO 10. New development that connects to the plant is subject to the Westside Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant Development Cost Charge as per bylaw number 1448. Stretching from the treatment plant in this middle of your screen 2IR10 on the right side of your screen is the East Trunk sewer system, which collects wastewater from parts of West Kelowna and Westbank First Nation IR number 9 and IR number 10, and then conveys that wastewater back to the treatment plant. New development that connects directly or indirectly to the East Trunk collection system is subject to the East Trunk development cost charge as per bylaw number 1463. The key detail is that this review applies only to new development that benefits from the West Bank treatment plant and the East Trunk systems. It does not affect existing homes that aren't creating new units. As each system has its own DCC bylaw, you will see two separate proposed rate changes. Next slide, please. So, why are we doing a major review now? Provincial best practices recommend a full DCC review about every 5 years. The current bylaws were adopted in 2020, so we're at that point. While rates have been adjusted annually for inflation, those adjustments do not capture changes in growth forecasts, system capacity, the scale and cost of infrastructure needed. This major review looks at all of that in one part. Next slide, please. As part of this review, we looked at a few different factors to calculate the DCCs. One being growth projections for City of West Kelowna, Westbank First Nation, and Peachland over the next 20 years. We also looked at how much capacity the system currently has and what upgrades will need to support future growth and development. Finally, we also updated construction cost estimates for those upgrades that are required to facilitate that future growth. Using this information, the DCCs are calculated and allocated so that the beneficiaries of growth-related infrastructure contribute fairly and costs are distributed equitably across land uses. It is important to note that these upgrades are being driven by future growth and not existing users. Existing users do continue to fund day-to-day service through regular user rates. DCCs are only used for growth-related capital infrastructure and cannot be used for operations or maintenance. Next slide, please. So, what are the proposed DCC rates? These proposed changes apply, again, only to new development. For the wastewater treatment plant DCC, the proposed increase is about 7.7 to 7.8%, and that applies consistently across residential and non-residential land uses. For a typical single detached residential parcel created at subdivision, the treatment plant DCC would increase from $4,787 to $5,156. For the East Trunk DCC, the proposed increase is about 5.2 to 5.3% for residential and non-residential land uses. For that same type of residential parcel, the East Trunk DCC would increase from $2,684 to $2,825. Next slide, please. So, what are the next steps? The public engagement phase is happening now as we speak. All feedback will be received, which is due tomorrow, March 19th, and will be summarized and presented to the RDCO board before any further bylaw readings or decisions are made. If the board chooses to advance the bylaws through second and third readings, it will be sent to the province for approval. Once the province approves the proposed updates, the bylaws will be brought back to the board for adoption, and a 1-year grace period will start for in-stream development. Next slide, please. That brings us to the end of this presentation, and we move on to the question and discussion portion of this. I'll hand it back to Haley.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Xavier, for that overview. So as you said, we'll now move into the question and answer portion of the session. I want to reiterate that tonight is about answering your questions and sharing information. If you have formal feedback you'd like to provide, please visit yoursay.rdco.com/DCC to provide feedback in the questions and comments tool. So I've got a few questions here that are commonly asked questions we've received on this topic, and I will start by going through those. So Xavier, will this increase affect existing homeowners? So someone who already owns a home in West Kelowna or Peachland or WFN?
No. So it does not affect existing homes that aren't creating any new units. This only applies to new development that benefit from West Bank treatment plant and the East Trunk systems.
Right. And so how are development cost charges collected?
So development cost charges are collected as part of the development approval process. This can be typically at either the subdivision stage or the build and permit phase, depending on the type of development. For these wastewater DCCs, RDCO does not collect the charges directly. The local jurisdictions, such as the City of West Kelowna, the District of Peachland, and Westbank First Nation, collect them alongside their own local DCCs for roads, parks, and water infrastructure. Those funds are then transferred to the RDCO and held in reserve, and they can only be used again for those growth-related wastewater infrastructure projects identified in the DCC background reports that's available on our Your Say page.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense. So how does the RDCO make sure that these DCCs are fair and not higher than necessary?
So that's a great question. The rates are based on detailed technical work, which includes looking up updated growth projections and then fairly technical wastewater system modeling, and then also those construction cost estimates. Only the portion of infrastructure that is required to support the future growth can be included in these DCC charges. Existing users continue to fund existing service through regular user rates. This process follows provincial legislation and the Development Cost Charge Best Practices Guide provided by the province. The bylaws are also reviewed by the province prior to adoption. Feedback from this engagement is also summarized and considered by the board. So we have a fulsome review process.
Okay. And so you talked about in the beginning that this is going to the board for decision following public consultation. So what would happen if these DCCs were not updated, if nothing changed?
So if the DCCs are not kept up to date, there is a risk that that growth-related infrastructure cost would fall onto existing taxpayers instead of a new development. So this is again just trying to ensure that the benefit it pays is the principle that we're working with. Updating the rates helps ensure the funding framework stays aligned with current costs and with those growth projections. So it's kind of keeps us on check.
And so are these DCC increases unusual or out of line with what RDCO and other communities in BC normally do? Can you speak a little bit about how this process sort of is standard across the province?
Yeah, so this again, we follow the BC's best practice manual, and it's quite prescriptive on how you calculate the rates and what process you should be going through. We've worked over the last few years to ensure that we kept up with inflationary updates. So this is not abnormal. This is a routine 5-year review carried out again in line with those best practices. The proposed increases are considered, I would say, modest, and again reflect those updated construction costs. And it's not really a policy change at this stage. It's just a continuation of the bylaws as they are.
Great. And so should these DCCs, as you've discussed them and as they've been proposed, get approved by the board and come into effect, when would they come into effect?
So once the board adopts them, they will go into effect immediately. However, for any in-stream applications, there's a 1-year grace period. So if you've submitted that application prior to adoption, you have a 1 year to finalize that. So there's that grace period to allow for additional time for developers to plan for those additional increases.
Great. So that was all the questions that I had today. Is there anything else that you'd like to add, that you'd like to make sure the attendees know?
No, I think we've covered everything.
Great. Okay. So just to, before we conclude tonight, I wanted to share just some closing updates for everyone of how they can share their feedback. So again, the public engagement period is open right now until March 19th. So tomorrow, we encourage you to visit yoursay.rdco.com/DCC, where you can learn more, see various bits of information on the project, those technical reports that Xavier spoke to. You can also submit a question or comment through that engagement page. And as Xavier said, all of those questions or comments will be compiled and brought forward to the board as we share the outcome of this public engagement. You can also reach out directly by email to engineer@rdco.com so we can receive your feedback and incorporate it into what goes to the board. And you're cutting it a little bit close for mail, but you can always drop off something written to 1450 KLO Road at our office in Kelowna. And again, that's another way to have your feedback and input incorporated. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Xavier, for your time and sharing that information. And we look forward to hearing from folks. Again, I'll say it one last time, yoursay.rdco.com/DCC is the best place to go for more information. This recording, as well as our slides from tonight, will be posted there as well. So thank you all, and have a great evening.
Thanks, Haley. Have a good night.
Okay, you don't have to leave. I'll just cut the video there.
Okay, yeah, it still says live.
Yeah, I will. So what I do is I end event. Attendees will see a message. The event has ended. I'm ending the event.